My name is Helen Crawford, 68, retired librarian from Rossford, Ohio. I spent 4 decades with a date stamp in one hand and a pencil in the other, teaching children that facts shelved neatly will outlast feelings thrown carelessly. My husband, Walter, used to say I could find any truth with a card catalog and a cup of tea. Walter died on a Tuesday, the sort of gray February day that makes a kettle sound like a hymn. We held the memorial in the church fellowship hall, folding chairs, coffee in silver urns, ham biscuits the ladies' circle always brings whether you ask or not. My daughter Laura stood close to her husband David, the man with the perfect handshake and a smile that never quite reached the corners of his eyes. "Let me handle the paperwork," David said, his palm hovering over my shoulder like a claim. "You should focus on healing. The estate is simple." Nothing about a 42-year marriage is simple. Still, I nodded because widows nod more than they speak. After the service, I saw him lean toward Mr. Polk, Walter's longtime attorney. A brief exchange, a tight smile, and Mr. Polk produced a manila envelope from his leather case. David accepted it, slid it under the guest book, and, when he thought no one watched, tucked it inside his blazer. I watched. Librarians always watch. "Mrs. Crawford," Mr. Polk said when he reached me, voice pitched too carefully. "Why don't we meet next week? Some adjustments were made to keep things efficient." Efficient, the word people use when they've already decided. Back home, the house echoed. Walter's slippers waited under his chair. The mail had come and dared to include catalogs he would no longer read. I set the sympathy cards in a neat stack and opened Walter's roll-top desk. The surface showed a faint rectangle of dust where an envelope had rested. The groove from the desk key told me it had been opened today, not yesterday. Paper leaves different clues when it's disturbed. I ran my finger along the grain and felt the smallest tremor of anger steady into focus. I boiled water. I poured tea. I listened to the kind of silence that files everything it hears. At midnight, I opened Walter's nightstand to fetch my reading glasses. His Bible, black leather, onion skin pages, slid forward as if nudged by an old habit. Walter hadn't been a church talker, but he was a margin writer. I almost put it back. Almost, when I lifted the cover, something heavier than scripture thumped against the inside board. A sealed envelope, not yet yellowed, addressed in Walter's steady hand. "For Helen, executor." I didn't open the envelope right away. You don't rush a message from the dead, especially from someone who kept his word better than most people keep breath. By morning, I'd folded laundry twice and rearranged the sugar canister before sitting at the kitchen table, Bible and envelope in front of me. Walter's handwriting was unmistakable, square, deliberate, the kind that comes from a man who believed mistakes were for erasers, not excuses. Inside was a single sheet of paper, notarized but unfiled. The date, 6 weeks before his last hospital stay. The title line stopped my breath, "Last Will and Testament of Walter J. Crawford." The first paragraph read like him, formal but kind. Then came the line that made my tea go cold. "I appoint my wife, Helen Crawford, as sole executor of my estate and beneficiary of our home, accounts, and life insurance, to ensure her stability after my passing." I read it twice, then a third time, because shock dulls the edges of reason. But when I called Mr. Polk's office that afternoon, his assistant said, "Mrs. Crawford, the official will on file lists your daughter, Laura Caldwell, as executor. Assets transferred to her for estate consolidation." "Consolidation?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "Her husband handled the paperwork. Mr. Polk said you'd agreed." Agreed. I hadn't signed a thing. I hung up and called Laura. She didn't answer, but David did, too quickly. "Mom," he said in his smooth managerial tone, "we talked about this at the service. You must be misremembering. Walter wanted everything in Laura's name. It streamlines taxes." "Walter never trusted shortcuts," I said quietly. "He built everything with receipts." "Then you should appreciate efficiency," he replied. That smirk audible even over the line. "The paperwork's filed. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at the Bible on the table. The leather cover seemed to pulse with weight. "David," I said, my voice steady now, "I found something you forgot to file." There was a pause, a flicker of panic under his words. "What do you mean?" I smiled to myself, the old librarian calm returning like muscle memory. Oh, nothing much. Just a piece of paper that changes everything. He chuckled nervously. Helen, you're grieving. Don't start. This is just beginning, I said and hung up. In the quiet that followed, I turned the Bible's front cover again, this time noticing faint indentations where another paper had been pressed and removed. Not long ago, someone had tried to erase Walter's final words and almost succeeded. The next morning, I drove to my daughter's house. Snow fell in thin, diagonal lines, the kind that whisper before they settle. Their driveway gleamed with two cars, his and hers, both bought with the kind of confidence that comes from someone else's checkbook. Laura opened the door wearing one of those smiles that only exist to block emotion. Mom, you should have called. We were just about to have brunch. Behind her, David poured orange juice into crystal glasses. The kitchen looked like a magazine spread, white marble, expensive appliances, and no trace of the people they'd stepped on to get there. I won't stay long, I said. I just need to clear something up about your father's will. David didn't even turn around. Oh, Helen, let's not go over that again. The lawyer explained everything. I'd like to hear it from you. He finally faced me, smiling as if we were playing cards and he'd already seen my hand. Walter and I talked before he passed. He wanted to make sure Laura and I were secure. You're fine, the house stays in your name for now, but legally it's part of the family estate now. Walter never said that, I replied. He left me executor in his own handwriting. I found the notarized document last night. The glass in his hand stopped midair. Laura's eyes widened just enough to betray fear. Mom, what are you talking about? She whispered. I reached into my purse, pulled out a copy of the first page, just enough to make my point. This, dated February 4th, your father's signature and Mr. Polk's notary stamp. David's charm cracked. Where did you get that? I didn't get it, I said. He left it for me. In the Bible he kept by his bed, the one you told me to donate. Laura looked between us, torn. David, you said the will was already filed? He snapped. Don't start, you know how confused she gets. That was the wrong sentence. I stepped forward, voice low but sharp. I cataloged 22,000 books in my lifetime, David. I can still read dates, signatures, and ink bleed. The real will was never filed because someone filed a different one instead. For the first time, he looked cornered. You're accusing me of a crime? No, I said softly. I'm just reminding you that even paper has memory, and it's about to start talking. As I turned to leave, I noticed a thin smear of toner ink on his thumb, the kind you get from handling photocopies. By Monday morning, my bank card stopped working. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Machines make mistakes, people fix them. But when the teller at Maple First Bank looked at her screen, then at me, her polite smile stiffened. I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford. Your account is going under review. It's been linked to the Crawford Family Estate Trust. Trust, I repeated. I didn't create any trust. It lists your daughter, Mrs. Caldwell, as trustee. All assets temporarily consolidated until probate finalizes. I stood there holding my worn leather wallet like a relic of another life. The same account Walter and I had built since our wedding, now under review. When I returned home, the mailbox had new brass lettering, Caldwell Residence. Someone had peeled my name away like old paint. That night, I called Laura again. Honey, why am I locked out of our account? Her voice cracked through the speaker. Mom, please don't be upset. David said this is just for legal protection. He's trying to help. By erasing my name? By keeping everything organized? She whispered, though her tone carried doubt. Dad wanted things simple. Your father believed in honesty, not shortcuts, I said quietly, and he never trusted a man who handled his own praise better than his taxes. She didn't reply. Then, click, the line went dead. I sat in silence until headlights flashed through my window. It was my neighbor Marilyn, a retired notary who'd witnessed 1,000 legal lies. She stepped inside holding a foil-covered casserole. You look like someone who needs starch and facts, she said. When I told her about the will, her eyes narrowed. Helen, I saw that man, your son-in-law, at the county clerk's office last Thursday. He was filing something. Said he was your representative. I felt my pulse climb. Representative? Showed them a document with your signature. I remember because it looked too smooth. No tremor. You always pause on your H. He didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by Walter's desk with a flashlight, scanning every file: bank statements, insurance letters, the last Christmas card from our grandson, each one evidence of a life built on precision. Around 2 a.m., I found an envelope marked Utilities 2022. Inside wasn't a bill, it was a photocopy of my signature. Clean, bold, mechanical. Someone had been practicing me, and whoever it was had already filed my name where it didn't belong. 2 days later, the locks on my front door changed. I came home from the grocery store, arms full of soup cans and bread, and the key I'd carried for 42 years no longer fit. The click that should have meant home answered me with a dull, final refusal. Through the window, I saw the furniture exactly where Walter left it, his reading lamp glowing faintly on a timer, his slippers still by the chair. But the house no longer recognized me. I set the groceries on the porch, breathing fog. A printed notice was taped to the door. Property under review by a state trustee. Entry restricted until probate closure. Caldwell Family Estate. The words hit harder than winter air. I wasn't a wife or widow anymore. I was a trespasser in my own home. I called Laura, heart hammering. She didn't answer. Then a text buzzed back instead. "Mom, please stay calm. It's temporary." David said it's just procedure, another word people use to hide intent. I sat in my car and stared at the porch light, the one Walter wired himself. He used to say, "Truth's like current, Helen. It doesn't stop at one switch." Now that light burned for someone else's signature. I drove to Marilyn's house because grief and confusion taste less bitter when you have company. She handed me a mug of cocoa and said, "You can stay here as long as you need, but you can't let them bury you in paperwork." That night, curled under her quilt, I listened to the quiet hum of her old refrigerator. I'd never felt so small. My phone buzzed once more, an email from the bank. Notice of property transition, title updated for legal efficiency, executor of estate, Laura Caldwell. No mention of my name, not even Helen. I stared at the glowing screen until tears blurred the words. Then I saw something faint but strange in the reflection. The outline of Walter's Bible on Marilyn's side table where I'd placed it earlier to keep it safe. I remembered the way it had thumped when I first opened it. The weight wasn't just the envelope. There had been something else. I rose from bed, heart pounding, and opened the Bible again under the lamp. Between Deuteronomy and Psalms, a folded receipt fluttered loose, dated 2 days before Walter's stroke. It wasn't a grocery receipt. It was from Toledo Notary Services. The handwriting beside the signature line read, in Walter's careful pen, "Final copy filed. Helen will know where to look." I didn't sleep again that night. The words on that receipt looped in my head. Helen will know where to look. For the first time since the funeral, I stopped crying and started thinking. Walter had left a trail, and trails were what librarians lived for. At sunrise, I drove downtown to the Toledo Notary Services office printed on the receipt. The building was small, yellow brick, blinds half drawn. Inside, the clerk looked up from her keyboard when I said my name. "Crawford." She nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember your husband. Kind man, brought donuts for everyone. We notarized a will for him in February." I felt my pulse thud. "Do you still have the record?" She opened a binder thick with forms and slid a page toward me. There it was, Walter's signature and mine as witness, dated February 4th, notarized by J. Holloway. The seal glinted like an answer finally surfacing, but there was something else stapled behind it. A copy of a retrieval request dated 3 weeks after Walter's death, signed by David Caldwell, claiming spousal permission. "He came back for the file," the clerk said you'd authorized him. I didn't. My voice came out flat like a verdict. He was persuasive. I remember thinking it was odd. He even joked that old signatures fade faster than memories. I stared at the page until the letters blurred. Then I asked for a certified copy of the record and paid cash. Outside, snow had turned to slush, but the air felt sharper, cleaner. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the grieving widow being handled. I was the archivist of truth, and my catalog was beginning to fill. Back at Marilyn's, I spread the evidence on her kitchen table: the Bible envelope, the receipt, the certified notary page. The pieces aligned too perfectly for coincidence. Marilyn whistled low. Honey, you've got him cornered. This isn't grief anymore, it's discovery. I poured coffee, steady hands for the first time in days. If Walter left this much for me to find, it means he knew someone would try to rewrite his story. Marilyn grinned. Then write it back. I opened my notebook and wrote one, heading in red ink: Plan for justice. Begin. I spent the next morning doing what I did best: organizing. When emotion fails, structure saves. I built folders the way I'd once built libraries, by subject, date, and truth. Folder 1, Original Will. Walter's notarized copy, Bible envelope, and clerk certification. Folder 2, Forgery Trail, David's retrieval request, the email from the bank, the property notice taped to my door. Folder 3, Proof of Intent, Marilyn's witness statement, her memory of his fake signature, and the utility folder where I'd found the forgery practice sheet. Each sheet slid neatly into place, quiet but lethal. Then I made 3 phone calls. First, to Marjorie Drummond, the lawyer who'd handled the town library's endowment. Marjorie, I said, I need someone who believes paper more than people. She chuckled softly. Then you've called the right woman. What are we proving? Forgery, fraud, and stupidity in equal measure. She agreed to meet that afternoon. Second, to the county clerk's office. I requested public copies of every document filed under the Caldwell Family Estate Trust. The clerk on the line hesitated when I mentioned the date, 2 days after Walter's death. That's unusual, she murmured. We'll have to check signatures. Please do, I said. Check carefully. The H always pauses halfway through. The third call was personal, to my daughter. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. Mom, I can't talk long, she said, whispering. David says, Laura, I interrupted. Just listen. By tomorrow, this won't be about opinions. It'll be about evidence. You need to decide which side of the ledger you want your name on. Mom, please, sweetheart, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry for you. You've been living in a house built on stolen ink. She went silent, then quietly. What are you going to do? I looked at the folders spread across the table like a paper battlefield. I'm going to file my own truth, I said. By evening, Marjorie and I sat in her office surrounded by legal pads and coffee cups. She read every document, nodding slowly. We'll start by filing a fraudulent probate claim and requesting a stay on property transfer. Once we have forensic ink analysis, they won't have a prayer. I smiled for the first time in days. Good, because prayers are all they'll have left. As we packed up, Marjorie held one document to the light and frowned. Helen, do you realize who notarized David's forged version? I leaned closer. Her finger tapped the seal J. Holloway, the same clerk who'd notarized Walter's original will. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse carrying 3 labeled folders and the quiet determination of a woman done being underestimated. The clerk at the probate counter blinked when she saw my stack of documents. Can I help you, ma'am? Yes, I said calmly, sliding the first folder forward. I'm here to file a fraudulent probate claim regarding the estate of Walter J. Crawford. Her polite expression faltered as she scanned the top sheet, the notarized will, Walter's signature clear and steady, the seal unmistakable. Then she froze. Mrs. Crawford, this signature belongs to J. Holloway, but there's already a second will in the system. Same notary name, different seal. I suspected as much, I replied, handing over folder 2. That's my first proof. Paper doesn't lie, but people often do. The clerk excused herself and returned with a supervisor. They both studied the pages, whispering. I caught fragments: date mismatch, backdated entry, duplicate seal number. After a few tense minutes, the supervisor looked up. Mrs. Crawford, would you be willing to make a sworn statement? I almost laughed. I've been making statements my whole life. This one will just have better punctuation. They led me to a small conference room where I signed and dated every form, noting that David Caldwell had filed documents using my signature 3 days after Walter's death. They printed a case number and handed me an official receipt. It felt heavier than any library card I'd ever held. Outside, the winter wind stung my face, but the cold felt honest. I drove straight to the bank next, Maple First, where the fraud had started. The manager, once too busy to take my calls, now greeted me with forced warmth. "Mrs. Crawford, I heard about the claim. How can we assist?" I slid the courthouse receipt across the desk. "Freeze every Caldwell-linked account tied to the estate until the court finishes. That's an order." He hesitated. "Do you have legal authority?" I opened my purse and pulled out the notarized copy, complete with court stamp and my executor title restored. "I do now." By afternoon, I'd sent certified letters to the property office, the insurance company, and Mr. Polk himself, alerting each that the real executor had reappeared, with proof. Physical proof #1, court-filed document and case receipt proving forged probate entry. That night, I called Marilyn. "It's official," I told her. "The story's filed." She laughed softly. "And what's the next chapter, Helen?" I looked at Walter's Bible, now resting open on the table under a pool of lamplight. "Redemption," I said. "For both of us." The next morning, an envelope slid under Marilyn's front door, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed unsigned. "Withdraw your claim or you'll regret exposing this." The unsigned note lay on Marilyn's rug like a threat that had run out of grammar. No address, no signature, just that flat line. "Withdraw your claim or you'll regret exposing this." Marilyn found me in the kitchen, coffee halfway to my lips. "You want me to call the sheriff?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Threats mean fear. Fear means we're close." By noon, I had an idea. There's one thing a liar can't stand: public silence. They expect a fight, not calm. So I wrote an invitation. That Friday, I hosted a family meeting at Maple First Bank's private conference room, the same place David once bragged about opening the Caldwell Family Estate Trust. The manager agreed to reserve it after seeing my court order. Laura arrived first, pale and quiet. David followed, crisp suit, phone in hand, arrogance restored. Behind him came Mr. Polk, looking like a man wishing he'd taken a different client. "Let's keep this civil," David began. "No need for dramatics." "Agreed," I said, placing a small recorder on the table. "For transparency." His jaw twitched. I opened folder 1, sliding out the notarized will. "This is Walter's true testament, signed, sealed, but never filed." He smirked. "That paper isn't valid. The filed version supersedes—" "The one you filed 3 days after Walter's death?" I interrupted. "Using a forged signature?" He blinked. I continued, calm and deliberate. "The county clerk confirmed 2 seals from the same notary number. One dated February 4th, the other February 26th. Posthumous." Mr. Polk's face drained. "I didn't authorize that second submission," he whispered. Laura's eyes darted between us. "David, is that true?" He forced a laugh. "They must have made a clerical mistake, right, Helen?" I slid the next page forward. Marilyn's sworn statement and the certified notary log from Jay Holloway's office. No mistake. This shows who requested retrieval: David Caldwell. And here. I played a clip on my phone. The courthouse clerk's voice filled the room. "Retrieval request signed under false spousal permission. Stamped March 2nd. Silence pressed down. Laura covered her mouth. "Oh my God." David stood, face crimson. "You think anyone will believe you?" "They already do," I said, nodding toward the frosted glass wall. The outline of 2 bank officers and Marjorie, my lawyer, stood just outside, listening. The door opened. Marjorie stepped in, holding an envelope. "Helen," she said, her tone razor calm, "the forensic ink report came in. You might want to hear this together." Marjorie laid the sealed envelope on the table like a judge setting down a verdict. David's smirk faltered just slightly, that microscopic shift people make when the air turns against them. She opened it slowly, sliding out 3 glossy pages of lab-certified truth. "Forensic analysis confirms," she read. "The ink and signature on the second will were produced with mechanical tracing. The pattern aligns with a digital template of Walter Crawford's 2017 driver's license signature." She looked up, eyes cold. "In plain English, forged." David exhaled a short, nervous laugh. "Anyone could fake that. You think the police will care about a family squabble?" Marjorie smiled thinly. They already do. The sheriff's office received a copy of this report 10 minutes ago. As of this morning, your trust is under review for probate fraud and falsified documentation. The room went still. Even the faint hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder. Laura's voice cracked. David, tell me this isn't real. He turned on her, sharp and desperate. You knew she'd try to destroy us. She's always hated me. She's my mother, Laura snapped, standing. And you tried to erase my father's legacy. Mr. Polk cleared his throat, trembling slightly. Mr. Caldwell, if what's been said is true, I'll have to recuse myself. You didn't disclose these alterations. Sit down, David barked, but the man was already gathering his papers. I didn't move. My voice stayed even. You didn't just forge a will. You used my grief as a cover story. You thought a widow wouldn't notice missing dates and double stamps. He slammed his palm against the table. You think this ends with your little show? You think a few papers change anything? Marjorie slid another document toward him, a temporary asset freeze order. It already has. He stared at the stamp, veins pulsing in his temple. Laura whispered, "Oh, what did you do, David?" He looked at her, then at me. For the first time, fear replaced fury. You'll regret this, Helen. I stood, gathering my folders. I've spent a lifetime in rooms filled with angry men and broken promises. Regret's not new to me. As I turned to leave, Marjorie's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then met my eyes. That was Sheriff Danner. They're on their way here. Through the glass, flashing red and blue lights began to streak across the parking lot, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The flashing lights from the sheriff's car bled through the frosted glass, painting the conference room in pulses of blue and red. David's breath quickened. You called the cops? No, I said. The evidence did. Two deputies entered, hats in hand, professional but alert. Sheriff Danner followed, a tall man with the careful stillness of someone who's seen every kind of lie. Mrs. Crawford, he greeted me. I understand you filed the initial fraudulent probate claim? Yes, sir. Everything you need is in these folders. But before you act, there's something else you should see. I reached into my bag and drew out an object wrapped in tissue paper, the second physical proof, the one Walter himself had left me without realizing how important it would become, his handwritten ledger. The room fell silent as I unfolded it. The paper had yellowed, the ink faint but legible. Across the top, in Walter's neat handwriting, final estate allocations for Helen and Laura. This ledger, I explained, was Walter's personal draft before the will. I found it inside his tool chest last week, tucked behind the old Bible. It lists account balances, property notes, and a final signature dated 2 days before his heart attack. Sheriff Danner leaned in. That's his handwriting? Marjorie nodded. Confirmed by a certified graphologist, it matches the signature on the original will, not the forged one. I turned the page. And here's where it gets interesting. A neat annotation in Walter's pen. To be held under my wife's name until our daughter is ready. No intermediaries. Underneath, in a different pen, David's handwriting, someone had added, amended, held under David Caldwell, trustee. Laura gasped. That's his handwriting. He must have done it after Dad died. Sheriff Danner took photos, his voice calm but clipped. This, combined with the ink report and duplicate notary seal, is enough for a full investigation. Mr. Caldwell, please stand. David froze. You can't be serious, but the sheriff's tone didn't waver. Forgery of a legal document, financial fraud, and interference with probate administration, those are serious enough. When the handcuffs clicked, David's facade cracked completely. You'll regret this, Helen. He spat again as they led him out. I already did, I murmured, just not in the way you think. Laura stood motionless, tears sliding down her face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Grief blinds us all, sweetheart, but the truth always knows how to find the light. Sheriff Danner paused at the door, turning back to me. Mrs. Crawford, one more thing. You might want to see what else was in his briefcase. He handed me a folded document sealed with my husband's old monogram, Walter's handwriting again. The title read, Amended Will, effective only upon my wife's death. I unfolded the last envelope with hands that didn't shake this time. Inside was a single-page addendum, Walter's true final instruction, notarized and time-stamped a week before his heart gave out. In his small, disciplined cursive, he'd written, "If any party, family or otherwise, attempts to alter this estate or claim power through deceit, all holdings are to revert to Helen Crawford exclusively. My trust in her is my final act." The notary's stamp was clean. The date aligned perfectly with the ledger entry. It was irrefutable. David, sitting cuffed by the door, lunged forward. "That's fake. You planted it." Sheriff Danner didn't even look up. "Already authenticated. Your fingerprints are on every other altered document, but not this one." For a long second, all I heard was the soft hum of the overhead light, the kind of silence that sounds like justice breathing in. Laura reached for the page, eyes trembling over each word. "He trusted you," she whispered, "and I let him down." "You believed the wrong person," I said gently. "That's not the same as betrayal, it's just heartbreak misplaced." Outside, reporters had already gathered. Somehow, word of the arrest had spread faster than I thought possible. The story had traction. Local contractor arrested for forging late father-in-law's will. Marjorie packed the last folder. "Everything's in your favor now. With this addendum, the estate is yours outright. He'll face sentencing within weeks." I looked at her, then at Laura. "No, the house goes to Laura as it was meant to, but I'm keeping the trust." Laura started to protest. "Mom," I shook my head. "Walter wanted the roof to shelter you, but the trust to protect me. I think he knew this storm was coming." David snarled from his chair. "You think this makes you noble? You ruined my life." I turned toward him, voice quiet but sharp. "You did that the moment you tried to erase a woman who built hers by his side." The deputies let him out. His shoes scraped against the tile like punctuation on a story too long overdue. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that empties years. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, a light dusting over the courthouse steps, soft enough to hide old footprints, but not the path I'd taken to get here. Laura slipped her hand into mine. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we start telling the truth again." Sheriff Danner caught up to us at the elevator, holding one last envelope. "Mrs. Crawford, this was filed this morning under your name. I thought you'd want to know." Inside was a check from the probate office, back pay from the frozen account. At the bottom, a handwritten note. "For the woman who refused to be erased." I looked down at the note one last time. For the woman who refused to be erased. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about proof that love, memory, and dignity can't be forged. Laura squeezed my hand. "You won, Mom." I smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart, we just corrected the record." Outside the courthouse, the wind carried soft flakes of snow across the parking lot. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I kept walking. I'd spent too long explaining myself to people who never really listened. Today, I didn't owe anyone a story. But maybe someone listening tonight needs to hear this. Don't let anyone rewrite your life to make their version easier to live. Because sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the truth leaves your name spelled correctly. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories U60 USA because stories like mine deserve to be heard.